For being late. It's not my usual thing, but as you know, this place gets a little crazy this time of year. With that, the Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government will come to order. I'd like to welcome the United States Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, and I appreciate your participation in today's hearing to give the members of the subcommittee the opportunity to discuss election readiness and general oversight of the United States Postal Service. I will be brief. I know my colleagues are all eager to engage you, those who could be here. Postal Service has been a cornerstone of American society, connecting families and communities and providing essential services like delivering prescriptions to elderly, mailing election ballots to our military serving overseas, and all citizens throughout the United States, while helping communities prosper by connecting small businesses beyond their own limits. While I expect a robust conversation this morning about the challenges facing the Postal Service and concerns about the declining delivery standards, I want to be clear that any frustrations with Postal Service leadership should not be perceived to extend to the hardworking Postal Service workers and letter carriers across our country. These individuals work long hours to bring needed deliveries to our neighbors, connect our communities, and ensure the continued flow of commerce. All of us up here have heard from constituents who had concerns about declining standards at the Postal Service. The changes made under the Delivering for America plan have brought new challenges, and the deteriorating performance of mail delivery, reduced mail routes, and rising delivery costs are frustrating both customers and business alike. From metropolitan cities to rural communities, disappointment in our nation's mail delivery system is widespread. For example, under the Delivering for America's plan to streamline and improve operations like Richmond, Virginia processing facility saw a staggering 21% drop in on-time performance for first-class mail. And in Atlanta, Georgia, the situation was worse after similar changes on-time performance for first-class mail plummeted by 51%. Unfortunately, many of these changes have served to further erode the public confidence in the U.S. Postal Service. It's important for us to remember that these are not just numbers on a report. We're talking about missed prescriptions, late checks, and delayed legal documents that directly harm the American citizens. As we approach the presidential election, many of our constituents have expressed concerns about the Postal Service ability to deliver election ballots securely and on time. It is imperative that the Postal Service get this right. Voting by mail increased by 25% from 2016 to 2020, and we expect that voting by mail will be popular again during the 2024 presidential election. We look forward to hearing how the Postal Service is approaching each step of the ballot delivery process, from postmarking, movement through postal facilities, and final transport to county election centers. Voters should never have to worry about if their ballot will be postmarked on time or if their ballot will reach their election center in time to be counted. The reliable delivery and processing of every vote isn't just a matter of efficiency, it's a fundamental expectation. Today, our goal here is to give the opportunity for you to reassure Americans that the Postal Service is fully prepared and ready to serve the American people during this election cycle and beyond. I look forward to today's dialogue to discuss other topics, and I turn to my friend and our acting ranking member, Mr. Cartwright, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the chairman for convening this important hearing about the vital role of the United States Postal Service in carrying out our nation's elections. It is vital that voting by mail remain a safe and secure option so that Americans can carry out their most basic civil duty with ease. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania alone, mail-in voting is popular as an alternative, with over 1.4 million Pennsylvanians requesting to vote by mail in the 2022 midterm elections. That number, as the chairman mentioned, is expected to rise in 2024, so I'm glad to discuss what measures are in place to ensure our Postal Service can continue securely processing election mail. I'd also like to welcome Postmaster General DeJoy. Thank you for coming today. In order to have as much time as possible for questions, I will leave it there and yield back now. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Postmaster General, without objection, your full written testimony will be entered into the record. And with that in mind, we'd ask you to please summarize your opening statement in 5 minutes.
He's handy. He's handy. As you know, for a variety of reasons, there is a heightened sensitivity and scrutiny across the entire vote-by-mail ecosystem. We recognize that the American public will become increasingly alarmed if there is ongoing dialogue that continues to question the reliability of the Postal Service in the upcoming elections. Let me be clear. The Postal Service is ready to successfully deliver the nation's mail-in ballots. We have a long track record of success, delivering election mail back to 1864. Even though during the global pandemic in 2020, we were successful in delivering historic volume of mail-in ballots during a presidential election year, delivering 99.89% of the ballots from voters to election officials within 7 days, our recommended common sense time frame for ballot return by mail. We will be even better prepared for 2024. Our network is designed to readily handle a surge in mail-in volume, just like we do every election and holiday season. Even in 2020, the historically high number of ballots accounted for just 0.1% of the Postal Service's total mail volume that year. As in the past, in each general election year, we deploy what are referred to as extraordinary measures, enabling our dedicated people to expedite ballots through our system in the days immediately preceding Election Day when deadlines loom. These processes, procedures, and their schedules for activation are identified in my written testimony. Importantly, the extraordinary measures we undertake immediately preceding Election Day are designed to rescue ballots that are entered late into our system, likely too late to make the election deadline set by election officials. They represent a deviation from normal mail flow and processing, meaning they won't run through our plants and processing machines as mail normally would. We engage in these heroic efforts to beat the clock, and they are only used when the risks inherent from deviating from our standard processes are justified by the risk of a voter's ballot not meeting a state's election deadline. In those instances, we prioritize expeditious delivery. One other key point that sometimes gets lost is that we are a national service, and to operate successfully, we must have consistent policies nationwide for our system to operate at the level of precision required. Despite our own consistency, we operate as the one uniform element in a sea of variation when it comes to elections. There are 50 states and thousands of election jurisdictions that are far from uniform in their election laws and practices, and that often don't consider how the mail system works. We do not determine state and local election laws or the extent to which they incorporate the mail. We do not conduct elections or determine their timing or deadlines. We do not determine when election officials mail ballots out to voters or when voters return ballots back to boards of elections via the mail. We do not determine how and whether election laws rely on our postmarks. We do not design ballots or ballot envelopes. Instead, the Postal Service collects, processes, transports, and delivers the nation election mail when public policy makers, election officials, or voters choose to use the mail as part of their election system or to participate in the election process, and we do so extremely well. Additionally, on an extensive and ongoing basis, we educate election officials and voters on how the mail system works and the additional measures that we employ year-round and in the weeks immediately preceding the general election that are specific to election mail. We will continue to encourage that the voting public mail early. And if they choose to return their ballot by mail, we recommend they do so at least 7 days before it must be back to their election official under the laws of the state where they are voting. That's the key to everyone's success, and we could use your help in communicating that message. Finally, internally, we are collectively working around the clock to communicate with all stakeholders in the voting ecosystem and address and resolve any issues. We are utilizing resources from the Inspection Service and the Inspector General to help ensure that we successfully deliver the nation's election mail. Let me end where I started. The Postal Service is fully ready to successfully deliver the nation's mail-in ballots for voters who choose to use us to vote. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. DeJoy. And before I recognize myself, I'd like to thank you for being here today because I think it's important that we have this honest, frank discussion the American people can understand. And I appreciate the points that you were making about different states having their rights and having their voting deadlines, and that we want to work together to make sure the public knows how they can be consistent with that. Now, we'll begin our questions, and each member will have 5 minutes for the questions and their answers. And when the time turns yellow, you have 1 minute remaining. And first, I will recognize myself. And, I would be remiss if I didn't start off with one that was specifically given to me by my Secretary of State, Frank LaRose. He's indicated that in 2020, the regional sort facility in Detroit experienced significant disruptions to the point that election mail for Northwest Ohio needed to be routed through Cleveland. And so I wonder, Mr. DeJoy, what has the Postal Service done to ensure that situations like that won't repeat itself in 2024?
So, sir, we are, as you recall, in 2020, the election of 2020, I was here maybe 3 months, right? 3 months. We were at the beginning of the election was in the middle of the pandemic. I would say to you that over the last 10, 11 years prior to me getting there, we had lost over $100 billion, had $20 billion worth of deferred maintenance, had significant turnover. We hired 200,000 people that year and never raised the top line level of employment at the organization. And we're about to run out of cash in 60 days. 650,000 person organization, about to run out of cash in 60 days. We are not in that position today. We are better. We got a long way to go, but there's been extensive, our ranks are full. In fact, I'm not looking to hire too many people for peak season because we're fully staffed, because I've converted over 190,000 people to full-time positions. We've invested in our facilities across the nation, close to $16 billion. And our training is extensive. We have significant oversight, both from the Inspector General and our own postal inspection, and me. I meet twice weekly on these processes. And the fact is that we are a system of 31,000 facilities on any given day. Right now, I'm shutting down plants in Florida because of the hurricane. On any given day, we have different issues for different reasons that go on throughout the country, if not throughout the world, and we have to respond to them. And if routing mail to a different location still gets it there 99.9-something% of the time, we're going to continue to do that. I don't know what the specific issues were in Detroit at the time. Many of them that continue from an ailing system. We're definitely have improved that.
Well, during the 2023 election, the Ohio Secretary of State found flats of mail sent by voters as early as October 24th, 2023, were received by all the boards on or about November 21st, 2023. All these problems trace back to the Cleveland Regional Sort Facility, which services my district. This is well past both the deadline for absentee votes to be counted and the estimated U.S. Postal Service standards. Effectively, these voters were disenfranchised because of the USPS failures. How specifically have you enhanced the all-clear procedures you referenced in response to the National Association of Secretaries of State? And can you assure us that these procedures will ensure that that doesn't happen in this upcoming election?
Well, I'm not. I would need the specifics of Cleveland, but our processes are extremely enhanced. Right now, I've set up an operational precisions group, not just for the election, that has 400 or 500 people around the country going into plants each day. I have a 650,000 person organization. I didn't have an internal audit department, my own internal department. So we've set up processes and procedures to follow reporting and going into plants and look at and checking on and validating the processes that we have. We kicked off an extensive training program back in July throughout the whole system. We have put specific alert. Our operation is broken into 3 different parts: processing and delivery, transportation and logistics, and retail and delivery. And all of those executives and those teams have specific tasks that they need to do within the facilities in terms of how we identify election mail that's being tendered, how it's moving through the process. We have we cleared in the plant at the end of the day, and that goes on to the delivery centers and into transportation, and they are executing that fairly well, pretty well. We have improvements. That's why I'm meeting 2 times a week to go over what the status is. I get reports from the OIG on a weekly basis. I get reports from my own inspection service. So again, I think our goal is to do what we have done before, at least in elections throughout the nation, is to perform highly admirably.
Thank you, Mr. DeJoy. I now recognize Mr. Cartwright for any questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, I want to I want to review previous postal performance and potential improvements to our election infrastructure. In July of this year, the Postal Service Inspector General published a report titled "The Postal Service's Election Mail Readiness for the 2024 General Election," and you're familiar with that report. And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to some of the points made in that. The IG's report found, as you testify, that the Postal Service appears to be ready to serve the American public during the election, but the report did highlight a few opportunities for operational improvements that I'd like to talk about. The report found some cases of election mail policies not being properly followed in some facilities, which caused some ballots to be out of place. And to correct this, the IG recommended additional training and education on election mail policies. How are you ensuring that Postal Service employees, from clerks to letter carriers to supervisors, have the time and resources they need to understand and internalize election mail procedures?
Thank you, sir. We are overwhelmingly enhancing our training across all aspects of our operation. That is the fundamental thing we need to do for these extra efforts that we put in election mail to actually work. Okay, so we are on lots of different processes and groups and departments in terms of our reorganization, and we're on a daily mission to train over 600,000 people across 31,000 ratty locations, I might say, on how to improve our operating practices across the board, and at this time, most specifically in the election mail area. Okay, we're doing very well at this, just not perfect. The OIG, on the other hand, has a couple hundred people. They send out to those same rowdy plants and interrogate and investigate our people and review processes, and they find some things wrong. They're perfect at that.
Sure. Tell us what the Learn and Grow education series is.
This is Learn and Grow is a normal process within the Postal Service where whatever subject matter that we want to teach our workforce on a specific issue. Sometimes it's in general to all areas of the organization. Sometimes it's specific to a department. We create content, be it written material, be it video, be it and we put it out across the organization through stand-up talks and other methods of.
And you've been growing that, is that correct?
We talk to our employees a whole lot.
Okay,
Now,
and on election mail, there's a weekly election mail education series that began in February. Am I correct in that?
We have a lot of things that, yes, so that if we have weekly, there's a lot of material out there with regard to election and other service matters.
Thank you. Now, the July Inspector General report also showed cases of employees who were trained on election mail policies but did not properly execute them during the election. The IG made multiple recommendations that management reinforce policies to postal workers handling election mail. In light of that report, how are you keeping election mail procedures front of mind for busy postal workers during the election?
So I have daily reporting that comes up to our performance improvement group, that comes up to each of the operational executives. I demand a high level of attention from the high-level parts of the organization. I meet 2 times a week on specific election matters, both in terms of operational processes, the training, and the communication with the election officials.
Is that the National Election Mail Joint Task Force you're talking about?
I've created a National Election Joint Mail Task Force that includes our union ambassadors from our union that are in our plants and review processes and communicate up through a committee a group that I set up in 2020 that is stood up for the whole year to interact with election officials and our people to improve processes.
All right, now your testimony mentions the Postal Service has many dedicated systems to get election mail where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. Can you discuss some of the details of these systems? Additionally, how will you track compliance with the systems?
Well, systems I'll apply it where I think we're talking about. Basically, the postal system as a whole, as it works, would collect mail and it move through its normal machine process, its collection, aggregation, its transportation process, its machine process to get through and go on to its destination in a normal course of business without segregating it and mining for it separately, throughout the process. That is the mail process as it was designed and been using, and this, for the most part, operates at a high level of precision. Right now, we deliver 60% of market-dominant mail a day in advance, and 96%, 97% the day after its delivery date. These statistics, about 80%, 40%, are all with regard to an archaic timing system, right? But for election mail, we add to that with additional processes called extraordinary measures, where we rifle through each day, our carriers. We rifle through 300 million pieces of mail as they move through the system and look for ballots and pull them out and expedite them through a variety of different ways across the nation. And there's a host of other operations that we take when we look at how our machine processes are worked. Right now, we will not even put a machine in for maintenance without me signing off on it. Right, because we put it, not necessarily because it's going to impact the mail, because we're trying to calm everybody down.
On that point, last question.
Yeah.
Are American citizens going to be able to trust mail-in ballots?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know why you wouldn't. We've delivered in the heightened part of a pandemic in the most sensationalized political time of elections, and we still got with a lot of noise, for lack of a better way, at the particular time, and we delivered at 99 point whatever % I mentioned earlier. So
Thank you,
not-
Mr.
not a
Chairman. I'll
doubt.
yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Now recognize Mrs. Hinson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce, our chairman, and our ranking member, Mr. Cartwright, for serving in that capacity today. Thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for coming before our committee. I think, as it's very clear here, Americans need to be able to trust you and that they can rely on you to get their election mail not only sent, but processed effectively, and then, of course, after that, accurately counted. And I know you're not a part of that part, but it's got to get there first. Earlier this month, a group of state election officials submitted a letter to you expressing concerns about that process for the mailed ballots for the general election. Addition to staff training and delivery times, they noted that they had not seen significant improvement or concerted efforts to remediate their concerns. Now, I appreciate also in your response, which I have both of these, their letter and then yours, that you committed to work more closely together with state and local officials leading up to the election. So in response to that, what specific actions have you taken to ensure that your staff are accessible to our state and local election officials on the ground in places like Iowa to be able to quickly address those concerns?
So thank you, Congresswoman. First off, the intensity of the interaction on the vote by mail from election mail officials under an extreme amount of pressure, and I recognize that. It's one of the reasons I stood up this special group 4 years ago that stayed year-round. We used to put them up for elections and then put them down to expand the interaction, to explain our processes, to get feedback, and so forth. And then we have 50 people, 50 regional managers that interact with election officials. I don't know. I mean, I am a very accessible Postmaster General.
Yeah, you're here today, which we
A phone call
appreciate.
would have helped instead of a letter to the press, because we've had a good working relationship with those. I got on the phone with them after. And we have scheduled meetings. I'm going to meet with the whole, with a larger part of that group. But I also, recognize that we're not perfect. We're not perfect in communication. We're not perfect it's not a perfect system.
So
And we
for our
are
people back home, so, just from this is about a relationship building then effort, so that they can know that those concerns are being heard, number one, but also acted upon. So are you, as far as these trainings, are you encouraging that so that people know, hey, we have a system to run our concerns up this food chain? If they do identify problems with mail-in ballots, are there going to be processes in place to ensure that USPS staff are not only responsive, that they're notified, and that these issues are dealt with in a timely manner?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Processes and systems are being intensely managed now and intensely reviewed. But to your question about the communication, we're a large organization going through a lot of change, and as intensity builds, Sometimes we're the last to the party, right? And we need, because of our functions. I have, after my conversation with those election officials, I convened a whole group that is in the nationwide election mail, our group. I convened a meeting of the 50 state people that are out there. I reviewed all their interactions. We had a review. I've added more executives to that particular team. I set up 2 meetings a week with them where we are analyzing the feedback and the complaints, and it's coming up through a larger executive team, and we're engaging in trying to be, however, we are proactive, but we need to be more proactive and not just wait for issues to come to us to have dialogue with these people, but to be proactive and express and building confidence.
Well, and you talked earlier about standard procedures, right, which I understand, and every election law is different in state to state, and I know you included that in your testimony, and I think just as we're having, the bigger conversation here about process, making sure that there is a very, very clear process. The relationship is part of it, and I appreciate those conversations are happening, but making sure that our people know, hey, we're keeping an eye on this. You have a standard process in place to not only deal with it in a timely fashion, but also remediate it and make sure it never happens again. Understanding that you are going through some of these major systematic changes, people don't want an excuse of a change. They want to make sure that their ballot's going to be there in time, right? And I think that that's what, when we're dealing with these people back home, I just would encourage you to be sensitive to that. I'd be happy to follow up with your office about working with our Iowa folks so that we can continue to keep an eye on that in the next couple of weeks to ensure that that follow-through is actually happening.
And we can do that. I have people ready to do that, and we're working on enhancing that process. But to the point about the changes in no way will impact, or will they ever consider to impact. In fact, the timing of the change, there's nothing going to be moving, after October 1st. We have decades to catch up with, and we've timed the changes, however good or bad they went, because there were other areas that they went well. And there was no intention or impact. And the processes that we deploy will catch any delays, of which mostly will be for the rescue efforts of last-minute balloting. So,
I appreciate that answer, and also your recommendation, and I think we need to be very clear, people need to send their absentee ballots, you said at least a week ahead, right? At least a week ahead, I think.
Help us out.
Very clear, let's get those in the mail as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sensen. Now recognize Mr. Pocan for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Postmaster, for being here. I know we had a meeting a while back, kind of behind closed doors, and you and I had a good, frank conversation on a number of issues. As you know, I've been a bit critical of some of the changes that you've made. You may remember I had, 5 days, people didn't get their mail in Madison, Wisconsin.
I remember you being frank.
Yes, I was. Thank you. And so I actually am heartened, and I want to make sure you hear this, by the fact that many of the procedures you explained you're going to do prior to election, including prioritizing ballots, because this is not something we've had a problem with in Wisconsin. In fact, I remember them bringing multiple trips a day of ballots in, and it did work well. So knowing that you haven't changed that, I'm heartened by, so thank you. And I think that will bode well for the election. Yeah, write that one down. Let me give you a little backhanded hearten, though. I'm also heartened that you're not doing changes on the regional transportation optimization or local transportation optimization programs between October 1st and Election Day. I might recommend you consider extending that period to forever for this reason. You did 2 pilot runs on the LTO. You did in Richmond, Virginia, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, in my state. Since those policies were implemented, Wisconsin's on-time 2-day delivery service dropped from 91.5% to 70.5%, and our 3 to 5 day delivery service fell from 86.2% to 67.9%. I think we are second worst in the country right now, and Virginia, I believe, was 4th worst, and it just so happens the other pilot was Richmond, Virginia. It seems to be perhaps some coincidental, operations that it's happening that way. But can you tell me more about if our service dropped that significantly since this was implemented? What makes you think this is a great plan to extend nationally. And again, I'm really heartened you're not extending it from October 1 to the election day. That gives me some reassurances. But our actual experience in Wisconsin was extremely negative, and we already have the processing center problems. Can you explain a little more about this?
Yes, sir, certainly. So, first off, most single-piece first-class mail, which what is our system is mostly designed for, was about 59 billion pieces a year in 2000. It was less than 12 billion last year. We still have the collection system and the collection from households, which I supported, put in our plan, and helped push through legislation that we committed to delivery to 167 million addresses 6 days a week, okay? But the collection, and collect it back to our spots, but we still run trucks, 50,000 trucks a day, 30%, 30% full. And we still have archaic business rules
If I
that
could.
generate these
Yeah, if I could, just because I want to make sure I have such limited time. The problem is, when you quit picking up mail the same day, and they have to wait another day, they put something in on a Friday, it doesn't get picked up till a Monday, right? The extension of that amount of time, remember, we had this conversation behind closed doors. Your mission is not necessarily to reduce costs. Your mission, first and foremost, is to deliver mail. But if we're having this reduced delivery because of processing centers and now because of this pilot project that you're going to take national, that's my concern, is that by not picking it up the same day like people are used to, you're going to extend that even more.
So, two things. Number one, I think this is a big problem for somebody like me who's trying to fix the place, right, is we have a legislative requirement to cover our cost. That's it. I don't get money. It's like, I get like 0.1% of our
Right, but
budget.
service, delivering the mail is your number one objective,
We're gonna
right?
deliver the mail.
And
We're
you
gonna
can
deliver
do
the
things
mail
like
at
postal bank, you could do a
167
lot of
million
other
addresses
things and
6 days a
extend to
week.
make money into the
And there's a
facility.
standard-
But if you can't deliver the mail, that's also going to affect your bottom line, and it affects our
The
constituents.
law also says, in the last one that was just passed in 2022, which maintained that I have to cover our cost, is that we have to create an integrated mail and package network. That means mail and packages move together, okay? Under the system that I came into, that was designed, that was losing $10 billion a year, that is not an integrated mail and package network. To do so, we will still.
The directive was not to have delayed mail and packages. It was to deliver the
That's-
mail and packages, and that's the
laws
problem,
are
is
never
the
very
changes you've
prescriptive.
made have delayed
Laws are
those
very never
things.
prescriptive when it comes to the United States Postal Service.
But you haven't addressed the delays.
So the delays, number one, we do have some operational implementation delays, right, in terms of changing it. There is also, this is one of the reasons I went in for the 3661, right, that we have in front of the Postal Regulatory Commission, to reconstruct. My whole national system is tied to a collection box time that's 30 miles outside of Roanoke, Virginia, for 2 pieces of mail that are in there. My whole system has to operate that way, around that. That's why we're losing so much money. I need to adjust some of those business rules that will still have mail delivered 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day at the worst. Some mail might go a day later in a 2 day to 3 day, but most mail will accelerate once I do that. We will drive significant cost out. And a 5-day system for a package delivery, which would move with the mail, is faster than UPS and FedEx on the ground. Right? So there are some adjustments. This cannot be fixed. This cannot be integrated. This cannot make money unless we get realistic about what has happened to the organization over the last 15 years, despite the 2006 PAEA legislation, which was probably the worst legislation ever thought up by the Congress, and that dramatically was punitive to this organization.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to get an answer in the second round.
I thought I answered your question.
Thank you, Mr. Pocan. We're going to move on to the Natalie address, Mr. Carl.
Postmaster General, thank you for joining us today. We had a very good conversation last time we got together. It was behind closed doors. It wasn't intentional. We were just trying to get some questions answered. And I told you my biggest concern, and I could not return back home if I didn't start with this. But you closed the post office in Spanish Fort, Alabama, and I had asked you if you would check on that, see what the possibilities are of opening that location back up. It was a simple retail. It was pretty, it wasn't mass managed. It was a very simple post office. And I want you to understand, like I told you at the last meeting, that by closing that post office, they lost their identity. And I get a text every day. I get hammered on social media every day. And we receive at least one or more phone calls every day wanting to know when the post office is going to be reopened back up in Spanish Fort. What can you tell me about that?
So, Senator, first, I did not close that post
Well,
office.
okay, you're-
That post office was closed a long time ago, as many hours in post offices were adjusted. About 70% of our post offices don't cover the cost of the people that work there. We could not, when we come to an end of a lease on a facility, landlords in those towns make uneconomical offers to us to renew, thinking that we would have to stay, and we could not make a deal with that particular landlord, and have not been able to find, and we communicate this a lot through my staff, but we've not been able to find suitable locations for a retail operation there. There are other post offices within, a few miles of that particular one. But I will, this year is our year to look more at how we expand the use of our 31,000 retail centers besides just priority mail bags and Hallmark cards, which don't cover the cost. And as we start doing more processes to enhance federal government communication and supplies, like we're doing with the COVID test kit program that we're launching today, or become a bigger enabler of commerce, like we're doing. We're the only ones growing in the package business, in the package industry this year. We see our retail operations being centers of the community, but it doesn't mean every retail operation. If I can't find a spot in a town to do our work effectively, I can't be there.
Would you allow me to help you find that spot?
Absolutely.
Because I promise you, I can find you a
Let's do
spot
it.
at a price you can't refuse.
Let's do it.
And well, you have whoever reach out to me, and
I
I'll
speak-
personally will go to Spanish Fort with them, and I know most of the owners of the strip malls and such, and we'll make sure they get what they want, which is a post office and their identity back, and I appreciate
I
that.
need a good rate, though.
Oh, hey, I told you I'll make you a deal you can't refuse. Hey, explain to me the 60 days out of, being out of cash. I assume your fiscal year is going to run through January 1st, or through December 31st, I should say. What's your plan on after 60 days?
No, this was before. Right now, I'm sitting on about $20 billion of cash. We were going to run out of cash. We were not paying into our employee retirement fund. We're still not. We were borrowing from it. We were deferring maintenance to the tune of 20. I go to put a conveyor in the facility for $8-9 million, and I got to pay $30 million to fix the bathrooms, the roofs, the parking lots, the dock doors. I walk in our plants and facilities, I see horror. My employees see just another day at work over the last 15 years. So, and cash, running out of cash. In fact, the Board of Governors, when I took the job, the Board of Governors request for Congress to put $70 billion into the organization, of which I said that's if we put $70 billion in, we'd be back in 2 years, right, for more money, and it wouldn't fix the problem. We have an operational problem, operational execution problem. We have a tools and equipment problem. We have an inability. We were poorly positioned in the marketplace to grow up, to grow our revenue. We didn't fight, the numerous lobbying issues and resistance that existed for making any particular change over the last 20 years. And we found ourselves in a place that we were going to run out of cash in 60 days if we paid our bills.
I appreciate the fact you're fighting for not just the postal employees, but also the locations, because some of them are very tired.
Yeah.
They truly are.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
awful.
Thank you. I've got more questions the next round, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Now recognize Mr. Edwards for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. DeJoy, thanks for being with us. Thanks for taking on this task. I can't imagine a job with any more risk, unless maybe it's Speaker of the House. You're not in an envious position. I need to be able to convince the folks back at home that absentee ballots are secure. And I'm still not able to do that. Could you walk me through very carefully a day in the life of an absentee ballot, from the moment that it gets put in the the mailbox till?
So we'll start with, let's start with the outgoing, because that's quick. Most election boards come, we have a tendering process, we have a way of marking ballots within the system. So they bring in trays of mail usually to go outbound, and we have a handoff. They can't come in the plant that week, but we have a handoff. And then there's a whole process of segregating and running these through our systems on the outbound to the voter. Okay, then coming back, if the voter, let's say they bring it into a post office, and they want to get it postmarked, we would hand postmark out a postmark. It usually gets put in with the loose mail, maybe separated in a different tray, but it moves with the loose mail from our post office on a truck, on our truck, our secure trucks, into the plant where we have processes to put it in the mail system, the machinable process, but also look through the plant at the end of the day to make sure that everything has cleared. We look in the machineries, we look in the corners, all that to make sure that it's cleared. And then we have special, especially now, come October, special processes coordinated with the election boards to shuttle back and forth mail to the election office. When we get to now, I think October 21st, when we turn it on, we don't even bring ballots back to the plant. If they're picked up from the collection box into the post office, ballots that are brought into the post office, we separate them, we hand stamp them if they're local, and they go right back to the election officials, and that's a coordinated effort. If they're going out of the area, back to the plant, we make sure we're cleared at the post office. They're again put with the loose mail and run back to the plant where they get processed and put back into the system. And we also to extend our reach. So from a post office, which serves a couple of 5-digit zip codes, we may put a hub to run multiple post offices to do the same, so it doesn't have to go back to the plant where we stamp and run secure. It goes back to that hub, and then back to we aggregate and go back to the election official. This gets done, sir, like every night religiously as we're going through. So we have, from my standpoint, very, very tight controls over what gets put in the system and gets delivered. I mean, it's in with 300 million other pieces of mail. We try and call it up, but we kind of babysit these pieces, through the process.
So would you? It sounds like there's a lot of visual inspection in there. That there's no real hard, firm electronic way to track a chain of custody from point A to point
So I would say most ballots don't. I mean, the exceptions are what I spoke to you about. Most ballots run through the machined process that goes through through our system. I think what I would tell you, sir, is our hand control throughout the system is a reliable hand control. Our people see ballots, they dive on them. There's been very, 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 very little proven other types of issues with us with regard to the processes that we deployed.
Well, thank you. I'm going to run out of time.
Yeah.
But there's one other line of question I'd like to ask. Do all state ballots look the same? How do you know to treat one in Minnesota the same as one that you get from North Carolina?
No, they don't look the same. And just the exceptions that we are talking about with the United States Postal Service are few, just as they are with the election boards, but they are there too. We get ballots with wrong addresses on them. We get ballots with non-machinable, not ability to run through our machines. We get a whole host of other issues, exceptions to the process. Besides that, they all look different. There are a number of states that have put an IB, so with regard to tracking, I misspoke. Those election boards that put an IMB barcode, we have recommended a barcode that they put on their ballots, both outgoing and incoming. We can watch that electronically through the process. And we collect that data and we make it available to the election boards so they can watch it. They could watch it going out, they could watch it and tell their voters that they received their ballot, and when it puts back in the mail, they can watch it coming back. We don't get into that data, we just make it available. If every election board did that, if every state did that, we'd have a whole lot easier job making sure that we perform at that high level, and it would be visible. That has been tossed around by Congress a number of times. Carolyn Maloney, when she was here, I worked with her on a bill, to put that through. We are considering internally with our board, trying to put in what we call a contract, a national contract together for certain election boards, where we can define that process, define the paper, define the barcode, define what everything looks like. I would tell you, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, that was not something that would have got any traction, in the Congress or anyway. It costs money. Election boards don't have a lot of money, right? Somebody's got to pay for it. I don't have a lot of money. So we have to come up with a methodology, but that would get at what you want. But there's not been a willingness to act. I mean, it's an easy thing to figure out if you're in the material handling. It's another material handling process that we could help the Congress figure out. It's just then we have to get the states to adopt it, all right, and use it.
Thank you very much, especially thanks for the suggestion. We'll be back in touch on that one.
Thank you.
I yield, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Would that be consistent with what I get from you every morning in my email that shows what mail's coming to my house that day?
That is different. That's informed delivery. It's a wonderful thing.
But it's the barcode system, though.
What's that?
It's a
Yeah.
barcode system.
Well, it's actually, we tie it to a barcode, but it's also a visual, it's camera image, right? So we take photos of everything that as it moves through. So it's an image, and we deploy that on our package business when I arrived here. And we plan to do a whole lot more with it. It is, there are various areas we've been discussing, and our general counsel here has been discussing, other methodologies of how we can, track stuff. But I think it's all kind of makeshift, and I don't want to be a proponent of makeshift solutions, right? I think the barcode that I just spoke with Congressman Edwards about, the IMB barcode, we expect perfection in an imperfect system, right? And if we want that perfection, we're all in. Let's try and help. We have suggestions and ideas as to how to do it. But as far, and look, I speak frankly also, as far as, we do everything we possibly can in an imperfect system that expects, the perfect. And we're a good target for a lot of blame. We're a good target for a lot of blame, because at the end of the day, the piece winds up with us someplace, right? And or came from us if it's presumed to be late. And that's, it's not healthy. It's not a healthy environment for the nation, for our employees. I'm fine.
I was just trying to point out that since that's already exists in your system, someone could know if they see their ballot and when they send it back in, if we use that program. But moving on, you might be surprised, but other members wanted to weigh in today so they could be part of this panel. And I told them that we weren't going to do that. However, if they submitted their questions to me in writing, I would make sure that I'd make it available for you. And only one person did, and this is from Andrew Clyde from the great state of Georgia, who wanted to talk about the Georgia Regional Processing and Distribution Center. Earlier this year, the U.S. Postal Service created a new regional processing and distribution center in Atlanta, which had a negative impact on mail delivery. Many of the facility's operational changes occurred just 3 weeks before Georgia's Republican presidential primary, raising the concern over mail and ballot security. Are Georgia mail-in ballots secure for the upcoming election? Please tell me all the steps that the U.S. Postal Service and the Atlanta Regional Processing and Distribution Center are taking to ensure the security of all the mail-in ballots. And secondly, how does the U.S. Postal Service track and monitor completed ballots in their facilities to ensure they are prioritized and reach their destination on time?
So, just one thing on Georgia's service, we're putting over $500 million into Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia area. Georgia's service is going to be some of the best in the nation shortly. When I arrived here, our service hasn't always been good. When I arrived here, our service was in the 70s in most areas. We built it up by spending a lot of money and hiring a lot of people and repositioning. So where it was like 94, where it got very good towards the end of 23, before we started embarking on these big specific, big specific changes that happened. And back then, Georgia was always in the bottom 25% of our performance. What went on in Georgia is an embarrassment to the organization, okay? And it should not have happened. And we are correcting for it, aggressively. I don't want to get into all the different reasons. Specifically with regard to the primary election, we got through that because I put a whole bunch of people down there and a whole bunch of double-checking processes in place. And the primaries, the performance was good on election mail for Georgia, okay? We have some of the service issues that we talked about with regard to the standard, but I have special GIMBAs going on in each of our 4 plants, it's mostly in the 3 plants around Atlanta. Every day people going in there, every day getting reporting, every day looking at closeout for ballots, and we're going to deliver Georgia's election ballots just fine. It's good. Or everything else that I said in terms of measures, procedures, operations, send them the video. I mean, I've answered it already.
Thank you. Mr. Cartwright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, as the Postal Service plans to consolidate resources around regions with higher population densities, it was reported that the Postal Service may begin to permit slower service for rural communities, as described in the Postal Service's Delivering for America plan. The Postal Service is planning to scale back rural delivery resources to cut costs. That was March 23, 2021, USPS Delivering for America plan. Luckily, the Postal Service has delayed implementation of these consolidation plans, as my colleague, Mr. Pocan, mentioned, until after the upcoming election. But what happens after the election? My fear is that once implemented, these consolidations will lead to eventual delays, negatively impacting rural Americans like some of my own constituents. People rely on the Postal Service to deliver their prescriptions, Social Security checks, other important mail. If faced with delays, rural Americans will experience longer delivery times or be forced to pay higher prices to commercial delivery companies, which is unacceptable. According to an August article in the Washington Post, August of this year, you stated that some portion of the mail showing up later is a price that has to be paid for letting the post office be neglected. And I'm hoping you can shed some light on those comments today. Is it acceptable for hardworking rural Americans like my constituents in northeastern Pennsylvania to be subjected to longer delivery times? Do you really think that rural Americans should have to pay the price, figuratively and literally, because of the Postal Service's management? Mr. DeJoy.
So I disagree with the premise, and I think it's an unfair accusation, considering the condition that the Postal Service has been allowed to get to, and also concerning, well, prescriptively what we're striving to do. First of all, we are not consolidating I have opened operations around the nation. We have put sorting and delivery centers in communities that were old abandoned plants throughout the nation. With regard to what we're going to do with the collection, what we're striving to do with regard to a collection. First of all, on delivery, medicines come from industrial bases, right, get shipped. We are committing to 6-day-a-week delivery. No matter where you are, we deliver. That's going to happen. So all inbound is going to move faster when we get done with this, because we're accelerating the concentrations of volume through the system to get there. On the collections, we go out 200, 300 miles each day to pick up, something from a place, and the whole system has to wait for that to start moving in an efficient manner. What we have in our filing is that we match that pickup and our delivery with the same thing. We are 6 to 24 hours. There'll be a 6 to 24-hour difference in the 1 day to 2, in the 2 day to 3 day, 3 day to 4 day, 4 day to 5 day. For that particular mail that is out of reach to do successfully. It will not go beyond 5 days because I'll put it up in the air and fly it if I have to. This, sir, is service that is going to be enhanced throughout the nation. It's going to help us. It's going to help us financially. It's going to do what we're required to do with that's specified in the Postal Reform Act, integrate mail and package movement. And I think it is a tolerable situation. In the Postal Service, my position here has always been that the Postal Service is all about rural America, right? There would be a real question if we were losing this type of money and only serving urban areas. But this cannot go on the way it is. It just cannot go on.
Hang on a second. Mr. Chairman, there's an article in the Washington Post from August of 2024 entitled, USPS Plans Rural Slowdown After Election to Cut Costs. That's the Washington Post, and I ask unanimous consent to append that to the record.
I would suggest you get more reliable sources of information, though. I mean, that the Washington Post has historically been a negative, unsubstantiated, sensationalized newspaper as it comes to matters with regard to the United States Postal Service.
Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carl?
Thank you, sir. Postmaster General, I want to save you here because you're going to be misquoted unless you clear it up. Who is handing these ballots? You told Mr. Edwards that the ballots were being handed off to you at the post office. Who is handing you those ballots?
Individual ballots?
Well, the way I understood it, it was bulk.
Outgoing ballots in bulk. That the ballots that go to mailers. Some states send it to everybody. Some it's where it comes from the elect. They're not votes. They're the ballots that people will use to fill out to vote.
Okay, so you're not talking about the incoming ballots. No one's bringing you okay.
Thank you for helping me out there.
That's what I'm getting at. No one can bring you a pallet full of.
Individual. In fact, if we postmark, you cannot. Once we postmark that ballot, you can't take it back.
So when I put my ballot in that box,
Yeah.
that is Postal Service mail at that point.
Postal Service mail.
And your employee's going to pay. Thank you. I just want to make sure that was clear before you misquoted.
Yep.
And give me an idea what a first-class stamp would cost if we truly had to pay the true value of it.
We are one of the cheapest in the world, right down there with Uruguay or something like that, to deliver mail. In Europe, it's $2 for first class. Some places $2 for first class mail. My goal, I mean, it would be over $1 right now. And especially now that we had there was a lot of complaints about raising prices. We had 20% inflation in the last 3 years, right? We get to raise our prices prospectively, but we have to pay our cost, in arrears. That's why we couldn't break. That's why we didn't break even. So it's and we had 15 years of a defective pricing model because of the Postal Regulatory Commission couldn't do basic division over 10 years, right? With mail volume has dropped 50% since the passage of PAEA, which froze our pricing relatively. If you were in business, that's what you would say. It froze our pricing, and volume got cut in half, and we never made any adjustments for that. But so you would have $1 something, it'd be in the high dollar range.
So that 20% inflation does affect the Postal Service. It does affect your employees. It does, in fact, affect all of us.
It affects inflation.
Everything.
Excessive inflation affects everything. We modeled, 2% inflation. We had We would have broke even in 2023. We had $3.3 billion of inflation. We had $6.3 billion loss, $3 billion of inflation, and another another 2 and something billion on the CSRS legislation.
So I know most people that work for a living did not get a 20% pay raise in the last 3 years. Has the Postal Service gotten a pay raise of 20% over the last 3 years?
No, we have rules, regulations, negotiated things, but it was higher than it was in the past.
Yeah.
It was higher than what we projected. Well, sir, for 10 years, labor, we all know, labor, the price of labor was pretty flat for a long time since the recession. 1%, 2% types of things. And then when we hit part of what drove inflation was a scarcity of labor, in the marketplace. So we had more hefty raises than we had in the last 10 years.
So all I was trying to do is add the human side to this. I mean, we have employees that didn't get pay raises. They've been hit with inflation. Our company's been hit with inflation. Even our postal service is paying the price of inflation. So inflation certainly is an issue that we've all been screaming and fussing about over the last few months.
With regard to my own area, the Postal Service has been hit with a lot in the last 4 years. We delivered. We didn't work from home during the pandemic, right? We worked in ratty places right next to each other, processing mail, went out, had retail centers, allowed people to come in with limited restrictions with regard to how they entered, our facilities, and we delivered out to the public each day to 167 million man addresses, and we delivered kits around half the planet, to help people, test themselves.
Well, again, thank you for your time. I'm trying to get home ahead of a hurricane, so I'm going to slip out of here.
Be safe, travel safely.
Thank you very much. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carl. Now recognize Mr. Pocan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so let's try again. I allowed you the time to you gave me the 30,000-foot view, right, that you are seeing a cost savings. I completely agree. That postal bill was before I was around here, was awful. Pre-funding 75 years into the future employee benefits. No company does that. Plenty of stupid was there, you're right. But here's my specific Wisconsin-related questions. And so as I hear the question from the gentleman from Georgia, who, as you remember, in our closed-door session, that came up before too, if the cure is like the cure was in Wisconsin, you kill the patient, right? When you did that processing changes to Wisconsin, you significantly slowed down our delivery. But specific to this LTO proposal that you piloted in Wisconsin and Virginia, which are now the second and fourth worst for turnaround times on delivery, specifically address this. In Wisconsin, 2-day delivery dropped 20 points, 91.5% on time to 70.5. 3 to 5 day delivery fell from 86.2 to 67.9. What in that said, I think this is a good idea. Let's take it to Pennsylvania and Iowa and Ohio and across the country, because I see it as a problem, right? Because if the goal of the post office is to deliver mail, which I think it is, it's not to be an accountant, that is part of your job, but the goal is to get our mail delivered timely. It is not to have this sort of drop in service through a pilot program that now you want to expand. And that's what I can't understand. That's the first question. Second, since we are second worst in the country, what do you do specifically about Wisconsin to fix our unique problem that we're having in these terrible turnaround times?
So first of all, the first rockets that went to the moon blew up. Okay, that's what pilots are
Thanks
for.
for blowing up Wisconsin, I guess.
That's what pilots are
Right.
for, right? To test. We have a problem. We have a solution for it. We wanted to see there were many things, both the service standard, how we measure service, how we do our sampling plan, and what our eventual solution is going to be.
So what are you doing different then? Again,
Well, the only thing we're doing
you hurt us. I don't want other places to be hurt, but what else are you going to do to fix us?
We're going to do a series of transactional adjustments and service measurement adjustments and service metric adjustments as we move forward with this, that are going to get your service to be 95% reliable, people can understand what it is, and you can understand what the service is, and we're gonna perform to that, and we're gonna save the Postal Service so rural America can, in fact, have a postal service for the future. I'm happy to come over and explain that to you in detail.
And you know what I would really appreciate? If you could show a specific plan for Wisconsin,
Yeah.
because you broke us, right? You blew the rocket ship up, I get that.
Yeah, well,
But what are we
just
doing
one
now
second.
to
That service
fix
standard, if
things?
you look in Wisconsin, right, the next day, we're at like 95% on time.
I would just like the plan to fix the service that dropped 20 points in multiple metrics of mail being delivered in my state. And then a follow-up question is, Tammy Baldwin, our senator from Wisconsin, sent you a letter about specifically some newspapers and problems they're having in Wisconsin. Monaco, Wisconsin, Lakeland Times lost 500 subscribers, 100,000 subscription revenue, not advertising revenue, over the past 4 years due to the closing of the Wausau mail processing facility, which again is what you're doing in Georgia right now, which is why I worry about the cure killing the patient, because it kind of did in Wisconsin. She also talked about in Iron County, their paper, 139-year-old newspaper, may face serious declines. How do you address that?
So I don't know about the Wausau closing. We have plenty of plants and facilities in Wisconsin. I also know that the periodical industry is under significant duress. I also know that I tape a quarter to every periodical I deliver. That's how much we lose on every single periodical.
But if you get your weekly paper 2 weeks later, which is kind of what's kind of happening here,
I don't.
people aren't subscribing. Well,
I don't buy that.
I'm
That's a
telling you,
generality that I do not.
that rocket
I'd
ship
be
you
more-
blew up
be more
also
specific.
blew up with the processing center, what you did, consolidation, when everything kind of comes out of Milwaukee now, no matter where you are in the state, you close multiple places. This is the problem of some of the efficiencies. And I understand, I truly understand you're focused on the cost savings. I just want you to be as focused on the delivery of mail, which is the mission of the Postal
I'm
Service.
very focused on the delivery of mail. No, you can go ask 650,000 employees where I spend my time. It is focused on the delivery of mail.
Well, and then I'm looking at the metrics in Wisconsin,
Well, I'll
and
try
unfortunately,
harder.
they're not working.
Try harder.
I appreciate it, and I'd appreciate that plan, too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now recognize Ms. Hinson for second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go to your testimony real quick and ask kind of a quick follow-up here. You say, for example, some jurisdictions allow voters to request mail-in ballots very close to Election Day, depending on when that ballot is mailed to the voter, again, by the election officials. It may be physically impossible for that voter to receive the ballot mail, complete their ballot, and return their ballot by mail in time to meet the jurisdiction's deadline, even with our extraordinary measures and despite our best efforts. So I understand that, right? You are the delivery mechanism, and state laws are different everywhere. I was a state representative. We worked on our election laws. So then you also say here you're going to continue your outreach to election officials and their mail service providers and share recommendations regarding best practices for how to successfully use the mail system. So I guess my question is, I think it's probably with 39 days out, too late to make changes at all these state legislatures. But, when we think about this going forward long-term and making sure this is, the election laws actually respect the process and make sure that it's realistic, right, to actually be delivered in time. So how are you going to make sure, like, long-term going forward, that your people are communicating those challenges with the very real, acknowledgement that state laws are different and there may need to be changes made there too?
Yeah, so first off, we do this throughout the year since we implemented that team on a bunch of different processes, work with the teams. The board, myself, and the rest of the team are looking at how we, and it's not necessarily, it's aligning expectations, it's aligning the pricing, and it's aligning the cost of doing this. That will be the solution, right? And that is what we all need to commit to. I can tell you specifically how we can best handle the collection, the delivery, so forth. I could give recommended tender times, tender meaning coming out of industry. I was in this industry. Built a big company in this industry, how things get interchanged, how they're measured.
Have you laid out those like legitimate tender? You talk about that. Have you laid that out for every state? And so, obviously with 50 different states, it's going to be a different process. What works in Iowa is not going to work in Alaska.
Yeah,
But have you laid that out so that we can make sure that those things are actually matching up?
We have been careful not to be an advocate for voting for by mail because it gets misconstrued. But if we're invited, but we do talk, when we're invited, we talk about enhancements to the process, most specifically the IMB code, having a, prescribed envelope, putting the barcode, the right barcode on it, tendering times, quality of the mail piece, design of the mail piece. We have people that help design mail pieces. So we have all these different things that we participate with when invited. We probably pushed more in the last couple of years to be a little over the line in what the organization has in the past been in terms of advocating for certain types of improvements with this. But we would, appreciate to participate in that dialogue. But even the legislation that I have seen, and I've been involved with the legislation, has not gone far enough to make it global. And then we're still dealing with the improprieties of everything has not gone far enough to figure out how it gets paid for, right? And so forth, which then therefore requires us to do all these, what I would say, and which was done even before I got here, I just kind of organized a little, these super unbelievable task of rifling through $300 million pieces of mail each day across 3.5 million square miles looking for ballots.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that as we go forward, to continue refining this process and make sure it works not only for each individual state, because I want to make sure our states have a purview over these elections as they should, but I also want to make sure that those laws are realistic in conjunction with what you can do to execute that. And, timing is everything, but I also understand, at the end of the day, Election Day this year is November 5th. If you're saying, 7 days at least ahead, and election law in that state does not jive with that, then something's out of whack here, right? And we need to make sure that we're communicating that. And I'm happy to be a part of that conversation, in Iowa, and I think any of us would like to advocate to make sure that our election laws work with what you can actually execute.
We are trying, just for next year, we are trying to put together an election mail product that a state can sign onto that would be more specific in terms of what it's supposed to do. Our board is interested in that, and I'm interested in seeing how we can move that forward. But it would mean, a strict compliance, and it would mean money.
No, understood. Well, thank you for coming again today. Appreciate the answers, and I'll follow up with you on Waterloo.
Yes, I
Appreciate it.
think I'll have good news for you.
Thank you.
With that, our time is concluded. There may be some members who couldn't make it today, but also like to submit questions for the record. Please submit any of those questions for the record to the subcommittee staff within 7 days. Given the current election readiness climate, we're asking Postal Service to respond to these questions within 15 days. Again, I really want to thank you for coming in today, Postmaster General DeJoy, and I appreciate your honesty and your candor. And with that, it concludes our hearing today. Stands adjourned.